Two of the best basketball programs in America meet up on Monday night in a game that both teams must win.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is a crossover edition of Locked On Coogs and Locked On Jayhawks with Locked On Coogs, Parker Ainsworth, joined by Derek Johnson of Locked On Jayhawks. Now, Derek, I typically open with some sort of a silly food question. It'd be a really quick turnaround for Houston fans to make it from Fertitta on Saturday to Fog Allen on Monday night. But is there a spot you got to stop something to eat in the region? You're there for one meal if you're there, I guess. It's not a very long trip.
Well, normally the give out would be, you get some Kansas City barbecue. Obviously, people down in Houston, they're going to have a different style, but still really good barbecue there. So maybe you go with something different here. If you're in Lawrence for the night, like you can't go wrong with, 715 Free State Brewery. It just kind of depends what vibe, like how nice are you looking to get out to? You want some wings, go to Jefferson's or something like that. So a lot of different options. But yeah, if you want something specific, like just hit me up at D Johnson Radio on Twitter, and I'd be happy to recommend something for what you're looking for.
D Johnson Radio on Twitter has the eats. And if you're driving or if you're renting a car and need some wheels to get to the game, we're going to recommend Mazda because they're moving the game forward. Like that segue. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda is the other story there. We got more on that fun later. Both teams need a win Monday night. That's, I think, the fun that's going to take over the majority of the episode. I want to talk about Monday nights in the fog and the stars showing up in this one with the maybe asterisk there. We'll talk about that all throughout the episode, I'm sure. Derek, Kansas comes off a tough Saturday. Houston comes off a tough Saturday. Both teams need to win and kind of have some stuff break their way here in the last couple weeks. They want to make a run at setting themselves up for a good March here. Tell us why this turns into a must-win game for Kansas.
Yeah, I think from a seeding perspective, both these teams have maybe a seed line off or two of what they're competing for, but like Houston's looking for that one seed. Kansas, I think, is, I don't know, after the Cincinnati loss, it's like, are they really still looking for a 2 seed? Well, if things went right for them this week, then maybe they are, but at the very least trying to, stay on that 3 line after losing to Cincinnati. And I think the importance too comes down to, with everything we've seen with the Darren Peterson situation, I think it is so critical for this Kansas team to get a top 4 seed in the Big 12 tournament where you're getting a double bye. Like, do you really want Darren Peterson potentially playing 4 games in 4 days? I know that would require you winning all the games, but like, you want to have potentially as little games as possible, especially coming into the NCAA tournament the following week. So I think all those are important. I think winning on home again is important. I think just in general, like getting a positive vibe back. You just had an 8-game winning streak. Now you've lost 2 out of 3, including kind of the ultimate letdown in the Cincinnati game. And you don't want to be the team that, you felt like you peaked too early in the season.
Yeah, and the same kind of vibe for Houston in a lot of ways. I don't know if they got a 2 seed if they let Houston play in the South Regional, because it'd be kind of pretty big knock on the 1 seed in that region, because South Regional doesn't notably go through the Toyota Center in Houston. So to get to play at home, they probably need the 1 seed. And then if they're going to get a 2 seed somewhere else, you got to play, maybe even a 3, depending on how things shake out, because you're not going to get a 2 seed in the same region as Arizona or an Iowa State or whomever. This really could come down to needing to win the conference to get into that conversation. And they got to win on Monday and have some help. They need Iowa State or Kansas or somebody to beat Arizona too. Probably need a good showing in the Big 12 tournament. This is shaping up where this gauntlet stretch by Houston having when they played Iowa State last Monday, Arizona on Saturday, and Kansas Monday night. They were talking about at least win 2 out of these 3, and really now they're 0-2, looking at the third one as one of the more daunting tasks here. I don't mean excuse me, I don't mean to say that Houston's got to be a 1 seed for this season to be like not a failure or whatever. Like that's certainly far from it, but it does shape up for a much better like a much more manageable March. You get a couple of things working your way. Monday night and all the things happening with this conference, you said to get a top 4 seed in the conference, and obviously Kansas everyone's got tough games the rest of the way. It's a Big 12 conference. Is it a protect home floor because you got just too tough a test coming up along the way, or what does Monday night mean for Kansas in that sense? They need it to get the top 4 seeds, you imagine.
Yeah, so that's part of it. Also, I mean, just defending they've already lost 2 home games in Allen Fieldhouse, which is more than they'd like to, that's for sure. And then you have the added element of, Houston came into Allen Fieldhouse last year and won at your building. It doesn't happen very often where KU loses back-to-back years at home to the same opponent. So, it's defending that. In fact, I don't know if that's ever happened, to be quite honest, under Bill Self. I'd have to go back and kind of think about that. And then you kind of look at the Big Monday thing, like Bill Self being undefeated at home on Big Monday, like those kind of come into this too. But it's one of those say it out loud tests where, like, no matter what, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for Houston to potentially lose 3 straight games. But if Kansas loses this game, they're probably going to lose 3 straight games too, because they'd be at Arizona on Saturday. So it's like, it doesn't make sense for one of these teams to lose 3 straight games, but that's seemingly exactly what's going to happen based on the results.
Yeah, and Houston hasn't lost 3 straight games, and I can't even remember how far back. They hadn't lost 2 straight games since their first couple games in the Big 12. Remember, I don't know if you remember that far back, but Houston lost at TCU and at Iowa State, and it's like, is Houston really ready for the Big 12 with the conversation, right? I would point out a couple weeks later, part of that conversation was stirred again by a double-digit loss, still the biggest conference loss Houston's had outside of a conference championship game. Biggest regular season Big 12 loss Houston's had in this conference. They're in Allen Fieldhouse, and I don't mean to say this team feels like that. That team was very talented. Jamal Shed was incredible player that year, Big 12 player of the year, and all of that jazz. It does feel like, honestly, there's moments where this team doesn't have. So Houston's still got more to prove, I guess what I'm getting at. Like, they haven't had a whole, even in their big wins, like a great, like, yes, I feel good about the way we came out of that game, right? Big win over BYU was great, but they won by 11 points and like left a lot on the table, right? Played great against Arkansas, but they gave up 84. So like they those kind of moments that just don't feel quite like a great Houston win yet over a good team. Kansas has to be kind of feeling like they need one of those too, I'd imagine, right? Like not quite a year where you'd think that they'd have that far.
Yeah, and I think with all the Darren Peterson discourse too, like it feels like we are on kind of a low turn right now with the discourse and conversation around this team. And then you lose to Cincinnati, which is, I mean, it was legitimately one of the worst losses of the Bill Self era. Like, it was I think it was their biggest home loss by deficit to an unranked opponent, I think was the loss there. You play a Cincinnati team who's like outside coming into the game, the top 150 on Ken Palm on offense, and you give up 84 points to them. So, from that standpoint, your pride's kind of being tested coming into this game. And, you have some highlight wins this year. You beat Arizona, you beat Iowa State, you beat Tennessee, right? You have some really good wins this year. But that's kind of it to me. It's the pride being tested. You lost to Houston at home last year, right? Don't lose 2 straight to them. Don't lose another game at home. Don't lose coming off of one of the worst losses that you've suffered with Cincinnati. Like, it's just kind of a gut check at this point, especially late in the season. Like, what do you want to be as a team? Do you want to have this be the start of a downturn for you? Or do you want to kind of fight back to what we just saw over the weekend?
Yeah, and it's interesting. First of all, I guess I should probably say thank you for maybe saving Wes Miller's job, because that helps the rest of the conference. Wes Miller, coach at Cincinnati. It's just weird that both these teams, I feel like, have such high ceilings, but we've seen so much of this low floor. And I don't mean to sound like the Debbie Downer after 2 straight losses. Teams lose 2 straight all the time. It doesn't mean you're having a bad season necessarily. It's the way they've happened, these large segments of the game. We'll talk about more of it in the second segment, I'm sure, but where Houston goes over 10 minutes yesterday without a field goal, and on Saturday without a field goal. And it's just worrisome as far as, like, you're just never going to win a game against the top teams not scoring for a quarter of the game, right? That's just not, no matter how good a defense you play, right? That's just not feasible. Now, it might not be feasible to win on Monday in Fog Allen anyway. I push back on that a little bit, but that does seem to be the trend. We're talking about that in just a second. But first, Derek, today's show is brought to you by Indeed.
Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one person you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the right people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all the boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Honestly, if you're a college basketball coach, just use Indeed sponsored jobs for the transfer portal, right? It just, hey, I want a 3-point shooter, I want a defender, certainly to work out, imagine. So spend time, less time searching, more time actually interviewing candidates who check all their boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire. This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs.
Coogs, Jayhawks, Monday night, Fog Allen. I want to talk about why I think that Houston can break this magical trend that Kansas has going on. I'm sure we'll talk about a bunch of that. But Derek, for the folks at home, Houston fans maybe hadn't heard this story yet, or maybe it's been acknowledged, everyone's heard about this point. What is the deal here with Monday night in the Fog with Bill Self for Kansas?
Yeah, he's undefeated at home on Big Monday in Allen Fieldhouse. And obviously that was put to test at a very high level when they hosted Arizona without Darren Peterson, and they still found a way to win. So, you know, we've found over the recent years, like over the last, handful of years, some of these incredible, like for the longest time, Bill Self had more Big 12 championships than he had home losses. And that kind of went away a couple of years ago. So just some silly numbers are silly numbers until they're not. So, we'll see if that continues, but certainly it's a number that makes you feel good for Kansas coming into a Monday night.
Well, and winning without Darren Peterson, and admittedly watching some of that game to kind of get a feel for Arizona before Houston played them, it felt more like it was about the crowd than the people. I mean, Bidunga played great. I mean, it's like the guy didn't play well, but it felt more like a true sixth man kind of feel than anything happening on the floor, right? That's part of the magic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it felt like the crowd was, for everybody I talked to who was at the game, like that was one of the best environments they've ever experienced at Allen Fieldhouse, which is, obviously saying something there. So I think they're going to need that same energy coming into this one. And in fact, Bill Self was so they basically have they call it camping. It's basically like a lottery system for students to get tickets, and they have to like camp inside Allen Fieldhouse and yada, yada, yada. Basically, you get your tickets. Well, anyway, Bill Self showed up at the lottery system this morning to apologize for the Cincinnati loss and to implore them to bring as much energy as possible for this Monday night game. And I can't remember another time that Bill Self has ever done that or has ever shown up to that event and said anything. So he's going to take this very seriously. He knows this is serious, and I think he's trying to, get that outreach to the fans that is the case. So this is probably going to be a pretty ruckus environment.
Well, and it should be, frankly. It's two great teams, two great conferences, two great opponents, and a great conference, great basketball night. And frankly, like I mentioned in the first segment, two teams that need a win. I do think Houston has played very well in hostile environments thus far this year. Obviously, they had a 4-point loss to Tech and a 3-point loss to Iowa State, but that Tech team had JT Toppin at the time, and which doesn't have anymore. And I think that does make it a very different team, obviously. But both crazy environments and like very close to nip and tuck losses. They also won in a neutral site that felt very much one-sided against Auburn earlier this year, at the very start of the year. It was in Birmingham, right? That's just 2 hours away. That 19,000 people there, a lot of navy and orange. And then they won at BYU. And I think one of the craziest environments in this conference, probably top 3 or 4 atmosphere. I think Houston will be ready for that. And actually having gone through some really tough basketball stretch, like played really good teams, is like battle tested. I almost worry more about being zapped as the third game in this 3-game stretch, being, and the energy the crowd will give Kansas and that kind of stuff. Do you think there'll be, you mentioned Self kind of tried to help spark with the crowd with get one for the Gipper speech. Is there any element of being let down after kind of an up and down year for Kansas, or up and down weekend, frankly.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the challenge is like, they even said in the post game, like Melvin Council, who's usually always a 100 out of 100 on the energy scale. He even said like, I wasn't as energetic as I needed to be this game. And I think Flory Badunga said after the game against Cincinnati, like that, they overlooked Cincinnati a little bit and that the energy just wasn't kind of there. So that's the question. Like, can you flip that switch back on? Because we both know, like with Houston basketball, if your energy isn't 100 going into that game, you're going to get punked. You're going to get punked on the glass. You're going to get, you're going to have too many turnovers. Like that is where Houston will just demolish you because they are going to always play with that effort and physicality. And like, I don't think they lost the Arizona game because of effort and physicality. They lost because they didn't score enough. They had that 10-minute stretch where, they couldn't get the ball in the basket and Krivas was defending the rim and stuff like that. So that's the big question for me. Now we do know this is a bunch of 18 to, I guess nowadays 25-year-old kids, but where college basketball and college sports in general, it's not as easy to say, hey, because you played really well this day, that's going to mean you play really well the next day, or because you played really poorly that day, that means you're going to play poorly the next day. There is a lot of ebbs and flows, right? And so do we see what was one of the best Kansas teams on that Monday against Arizona that then, we also saw the previous Saturday let Utah hang around, with not a very good game for KU, and that's a bad Utah team because they were looking ahead. Do we see a similar kind of situation here where they didn't play well against Cincinnati because they were looking ahead and now they're going to be fired up for this game? That would kind of be the question, but I have no doubt in my mind, Houston's going to come into this one, fired up, and you would hope Kansas does too.
Yeah. And it's an interesting, we mentioned, like I said, the first segment was about that they both have to win this game. This feels like to me, Houston wins last year's game in miraculous fashion in Fog Allen. And it was kind of one of the crazier endings in college sports, frankly, right? Like how you go from down 6 with 15 seconds left to win the game ultimately is pretty wild. And I don't imagine the crowd, players change, et cetera. The crowd, I don't think has forgotten that, right? I think they'll be loud start to finish given all that. If they lost more than just the Cincinnati game as of late, I might be more worried, but they're sitting at 10-4. And frankly, I'm not betting on it. I don't think it's outside the world of possibilities that you win this conference at 14-4, right? And it like would take a couple breaks and this and that, but I don't think that's that crazy a thought. And so I think that they'll be very much tuned into that. The Bill Self of this is interesting to me because you mentioned at one point he had more home losses or had more Big 12 championships than home losses. I'm going to say he's lost his luster or has gotten over the hill. He's still a very talented basketball coach. It does feel like the conference has caught up to him some, whether that's adding Houston, Arizona, or otherwise. Do you feel confident in him coming off of a tough Saturday to turn that around by Monday with let's just face it, a roster that's had some turbulence in it so far?
Yeah, I have no doubts in my mind on what Bill Self's going to provide for the team. I mean, it's just hard to – I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like hard to coach effort, right? If you're not going to play with effort on a Saturday, like it's just kind of hard you can't really game plan around that if you're KU, you know what I mean? And it's also tough to game plan when Cincinnati's big man of duo of Baba Miller and Cham, who come in shooting 16% and 20% from three, go 4 of 7 from three. Like those are tough things to kind of deal with, right? But no, I think Bill Self's had a really good season. I mean, the fact that Bill Self has basically been coaching 2 teams at different point, like the one with Darren Peterson, the one without, I think speaks very highly to what he's done. But I'm glad you brought up the last year's game again with KU Houston, because looking back, like, was that not kind of a defining moment for both teams? I get like Houston had a lot of big wins last year, obviously, but when you think about what Houston did in the Duke game, it's hard for me, at least, not to draw parallels with what happened in that game at Allen Fieldhouse and be like, was that the blueprint that Houston proved to themselves they could do to when they got to that Duke moment, they were like, hey, look, we had this comeback win at Kansas. This is, we can do it again, right? Whereas with Kansas, even after the season ended in the first round to Arkansas, like Rylan Griffin was asked about it after the game, and he was like, yeah, honestly, it didn't feel like anything was ever the same after we blew that game to Houston. And that kind of became a defining moment for both teams, for better or for worse.
Was it Zeke Mayo posted selling his jerseys on Instagram or whatever too? And I almost went in, I was like, can I buy that jersey? Yes, absolutely. And I would almost argue it carried over so much to where when Houston played Arizona on Saturday, one was 6 points with a minute left. I was like, we've done this. Like in my own head, I was like talking myself into it, and it's not quite the same team even. I was still talking myself into it. I think that absolutely carried over throughout the year. This game happens later this year, but you could almost argue that with the way the season's shaping up and both teams kind of need to make one last push to win this conference, like could a big Monday night performance kind of propel in either direction, frankly, this team to the next step, whether it's a big win with the Peterson and the two teams in the whole nine for Kansas kind of brings people together after talks of that not being the case on Saturday. Or for Houston, it was like, hey, we bounced back and like we found our identity. We found ourselves after a couple tough losses. Now this is who we are the rest. Like that could work either way for both teams. And who is on the floor for both teams will be a constant conversation. And I want to talk about that in the most polite way possible. I promise, Derek, in just 1 second. But first, today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Mazda. Mazda moving the game forward. For those who know that there's more to the score than what's on the screen. Look, Kingston Flemings puts in work all offseason, puts in work every day of the calendar year. He didn't do the big prep time academies, didn't do the big AAU circuits. He was a Puma guy, a 6A public high school guy, just put in work every day and raised the bar. And that's what reminds us that it takes raising the bar a little bit extra work, extra grit, extra never quit, giving that extra fire to push things forward like with Mazda because they put the same passion to every model. Highlights make the real, but what it takes to get there is what counts. That's why there's more to a Mazda. There's more to you. Today's show is also brought to you by our buddies over at FanDuel. Because if you've ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use a profit boost on NBA Future to be automatically entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. Flights, tickets, the entire experience for two people all through FanDuel. If you've already been looking at the board about what team can make a deep run or what kind of chaos you see happening in the playoffs, put some of that profit boost down on it, and FanDuel will do the rest of the work for you. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play a game with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Derek, you alluded to it. This Kansas team is kind of two teams. And to be fair, the team that on paper is worse than the two beat Arizona. So I don't mean to say that they're not both talented. I shouldn't, right? This is two good teams. But coaching two good teams, playing two good teams also gives you a team that like can't find itself and beat Cincinnati over the weekend. And so where do you think that puts this Kansas roster going to, like, is this a good Houston team so Darren Peterson is going to play 25, 30 minutes? Like what happens with the Darren Peterson issue going into Monday?
Yeah, it's one of those weird things because it's like the very best potential version of Kansas is Darren Peterson playing well, synergy with the rest of the team. And like they do have some big wins with Darren Peterson too. I don't want that to kind of get lost in it, right? They beat Iowa State at home by 20 points, but what we've seen here is the version of Darren Peterson where the rest of the team does not have the same chemistry with him, whether it's he just missed a game and he's reintegrating to things or just doesn't look right, has not been as good as the version of Kansas that, it's just different from a chemistry perspective. The ball movement is different. And so, it's just one of those things where it's really tough to kind of figure out what you're going to get going into a game against Houston. If you don't move the ball well, it's going to be a problem. So I think that's going to be really interesting. And when you think of Houston being this tough, physical, rugged team and defense, and you think of what Darren Peterson's dealing with, how is he going to deal with some of those things? And I also think of the defensive end of the floor. If the matchup is going to be Emmanuel Sharp and Darren Peterson there, like Sharp runs a lot around the floor, right? A lot of with these off-ball actions, he's running off of screens. Like that is a lot for Darren Peterson to chase around. So I don't know how KU is going to kind of defend that, but I think it's going to be really interesting, especially on a short turnaround from a Saturday to a Monday. If you set the over-under for me of Darren Peterson minutes, 20, 29, 30, I'd probably be taking the under in this game. Then again, we just did see him finish out the Cincinnati game, but he didn't look very explosive in the game. And it looked like KU was sacrificing, explosiveness for, okay, he's going to keep playing minutes. And how much of that was him just saying, hey, if I'm going to have to play all these minutes, I'm not going to, try to give full explosiveness versus how much he just physically couldn't. I don't entirely know, but it does seem like a big challenge for him to play a lot of minutes in this game, or at least if he does, be fully impactful and effective.
Well, and it's almost interesting to me because I don't know necessarily who matches up with Darren Peterson, and I like obviously it's a team effort wins in the game, right? Like he scores a lot of different ways, and when he is on, he is truly one of the best players in America. He's a top caliber pick for a lot of reasons, right? I don't know if you go with Sharp and the physicality, but you also probably want someone with some length on Trey White. And Sharp typically does the best with those kind of guys. Houston's guards are all listed 6'4", but Sharp has the longest wingspan. He's got like a 6'8" wingspan like that. And so you can do more there. Milo Suzanne's kind of become more of a defensive first guy this year for Houston. Does he? I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is. I do know that for whatever portion of the game Darren Peterson's out there, I think they need to try and be physical with him the most the refs will allow, because you don't know how much he can handle, how much he's doing, how much he's dealing with as well, right? All that I think adds up. Last 2 years, Houston has, had to play Dickinson down low. And last year, I think Houston focused a lot on Dickinson. And the first match between these teams, Bidunga, actually a really big game. And now Bidunga is kind of the guy. Do you feel like he almost has more of an impact on how this team goes than Peterson because they've managed to win games both with and without him? Is Bidunga that much more important to what they do?
So it's like, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, yes, if Darren Peterson, you're getting scorched earth Darren Peterson, and he has this super efficient shooting game, like that's going to be more impactful. But yeah, on a day-to-day basis, on a game-to-game basis, the Flory thing has been more consistent. I mean, Flory is key to what this team does defensively. He can guard different players. Like he went from guarding AJ DeBonsa in the BYU game to the very next game guarding JT Toppin. Like the versatility you get defensively there is really impressive. I think he's going to be, actually more important in this game for KU too, because when you look at what Houston does, crashing the offensive glass, can Flory, because KU's had some problems this year on defensive rebounding. And so if you want to fix that in this game, like that kind of starts with Flory Badunga. And then the flip side of that is, what can you provide offensively against guys like JoJo Tugler and Chris Sinak? I'm also going to be really interested, who does Flory guard, right? Like Bryson Tiller actually has a bigger wingspan than Flory, and he's a little bit thicker. So sometimes we've seen Flory guard the more versatile big, which in theory would be Sinak. Where will we see Tiller on Tugler? Or does KU say we're going to put Tiller on Sinak and we're going to put Flory on Tugler and basically have Flory as with Tugler being a little less of an offensive threat, give him more reign to be able to, be a weak side rim protector and shot blocker. I think that's going to be really interesting. And then I think the flip side, how does Houston guard the two big men for Kansas is going to be super intriguing.
Yeah, because theoretically, I would initially think pulling Bidunga out from the basket to guard Chris would actually help Houston a lot, because Bidunga's got like almost 3 blocks a game. That pulls that guy away from the rim in a way, because Chris does shoot a bunch of threes and stuff like that. But also, I would imagine that Chris is going to get beat up. But I can see it going both ways on that. Maybe the answer is Council. Who covers Kingston?
I think it's Council. So Council's probably the fastest player on KU. He's also I think when Darren Peterson's engaged, he is actually the team's best defender, but it comes and goes. When Council's been the most consistent perimeter defender. And then when you look at the speed, I think both of those are reasons to have him on him. I think that makes sense. But that's, again, where it gets difficult, because it's like if you're putting Peterson on Sharp, you're acknowledging he's going to be running around a lot on the defensive end. So maybe it is, Trey White and Sharp. Maybe that does end up being a cross match for both sides with what you kind of mentioned there. I don't know. That's going to be a really interesting one for KU.
Do you think, obviously – my audience has watched Kingston every game. I don't know how much of his game you've watched. He's got surged in the top
incredible.
5-10 pick kind of guy, crazy freshman year. Do you think counts? He gave Tech 40 something points in Houston lost, so I guess he could score a bunch of points. Doesn't matter. Do you think Council can slow him down?
So it's one of those things. Obviously, when you get to a star player, it's like, Kingston Flemings could still have 15 points, but it could be a good game for KU if you make him inefficient. We've seen games where Council's been really engaged. Like the game that everybody goes back to in the exhibition, he played Mikel Brown for Louisville. And I don't remember the exact point total. It was single digits for Mikel Brown. He was like 2 of 14. And that was Council taking him as the primary. So there have been games where Council has led to an off night for the other player. I do think Council, his speed, being able to keep up with Flemings probably more than a lot of other guys Flemings plays against, will be helpful there. But I'm not going to be picking, I'm not going to be expecting Kingston Flemings to have like 8 points. I'm still going to be expecting him to score, 15 to 20 points and have it a big game because he's just that special of a talent.
He's been tremendous this year, and I almost feel like the biggest thing, so like Houston, as mentioned, lost to Tech when he had over 40, because I actually think he does really well is get other guys involved once he's beaten his man off the bounce a couple times and collapses the defense and this and that. So that head-to-head with he and Council may be important in a number of ways, because if he gets 2 or 3 mid-range or 2 or 3 in the paint pretty quickly and you start seeing Kansas adjust, that could open up a lot of other things for him to be dishing it out. He had a couple skip passes that turned into misses on Saturday that I still don't really understand how the ball got where it's supposed to go. But I say all that to say that the stars should align here, where you see some true first-round talent in Peterson and Kingston and Sinak and all these guys. Is there someone that maybe isn't that first-round talent that that is going to make an impact in this game? Because Anthony Delorso just lit up Houston on Saturday, and I don't think that guy is a first-round talent, but he certainly looked like one on Saturday, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would just like to say I think Emmanuel Sharp should be a first-round pick. That dude has been so awesome in college basketball, the wingspan, the three-point shooting, the toughness, but that's neither here nor there. I'll give you 2. One would be Bryson Tiller, who could potentially be a first-round pick in a couple of years. He won't be one this year. That'll be interesting just with the bigs and the cross matches we were talking about. But here's the guy that I immediately thought of is Elmarco Jackson, who has been this like roller coaster of a player for KU. There are some really high moments. There's some really high plays. And then there's some other plays where you're kind of just like, what are you doing there? What are you doing there? Now, Elmarco's a good defender. He usually the guy he's guarding might have like one big highlight play, but for the most part, he's pretty solid. He's one of KU's better, players at getting a steal on the defensive end. And when I look at Kingston Flemings, this athletic guard, when Melvin Council needs a break, when he needs to go to the bench, or when, you just want to give him a little bit more of a rest because of everything he provides on both ends, I think Elmarco is going to get some minutes here or there on Kingston Flemings, and how he does in those minutes is going to be crucial for what KU can do. And in addition to, can he give KU like 7 points off the bench? I think would be huge. Is there somebody from Houston you think could be kind of underrated?
Well, and I think so, and I don't mean to go totally down a rabbit hole here. So, Khalifa Sacco is the bench pick for Houston, and Jojo Tugler has been notably in foul trouble a lot this season. And I don't mean this in a accusatory way, and I hope this doesn't come off that way. He's also observing Ramadan, and like Saturday's game was completely during the daytime, and I don't think that necessarily impacted a whole lot. I will say that I feel like that might mean the Ramadan impact on a night game Monday night is less, right? Because he can be hydrated and fueled throughout the game in a different kind of way. On top of the typical, if you read the great book, Dream by Miriam Fedor and Akeem Olajuwon, he talked about how Ramadan actually helped him focus in a lot of ways because it was the only thing that he could focus on. He couldn't worry about anything else. It was all, whatever. And so maybe some combination of all that. He also has had kind of an up and down season, but after these low points, it tends to bounce back with big games. So I'm kind of saying if he can be that impact role off the bench. You mentioned Bidunga being an impactful big, Tiller being an impactful big. You kind of Houston get that 3-headed monster of he and Sinak and Sock and Tugler down there working. Now we'll be live after the game. I'm sure y'all be posting up stuff as well. Big week. You got Kansas and Arizona. I can tell you right now, don't be fooled by that whole no Pete thing. They're still really good. They're still really good over there in Arizona. Anything else going on at Locked On Jayhawks this week?
No, just, we'll be up after the show a little bit, and then, we'll get you ready for that Arizona game later on in the week. So, it's just same for you. Like, this time of year is awesome. It's super, super fun. We got the Big 12 tournament up, which depending how much the bracket breaks in the NCAA tournament, like, there's a chance the Big 12 semifinals could end up being better than the Final Four. Who knows? Yeah,
very real chance. That's Locked On Jayhawks, Derek Johnson, Locked On Coogs, Parker Ainsworth. As always, I sound with Go Coogs. I don't know what y'all's deal is. We do hand signs.
Technically, we got Beacom, but that's a little less used.
There you go.